Just for you recent arrivals, just to point out that we're recording this session because we may be sharing it to any parents who couldn't make it to this session. Okay. So I think it's 9:07. I think we've given pretty much everyone a chance to join, and then if anyone else joins along the way, I think we can add them in as well. So yeah, I wanted to start by saying a very big thank you to all of you for coming and joining our PYP sort of intro to PYP coffee morning session here this morning. I hope everybody has a coffee or another beverage of choice. Our goal here today is really it's just to give an overview of what the IB is going to look like at NJIS, and also just to sort of scale back a little bit and give some background about why an approach like the IB is so important. Why, if IB is the solution, then what is the problem essentially? What is the reason for this new, more holistic approach to education, and why are schools around the world, and why did NJIS make the decision to move towards becoming an IB school? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen like so. There we go. And I'm going to. Is everyone able to see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
perfect.
I can see that.
This is me with my first ever class in Indonesia. This was at an IB school in Bogor, and this was my first ever class when I arrived in Indonesia about I think just under 20 years ago. These kids, if I can pick out some of them, Jonathan here now lives in Liverpool. Crystal here is now a construction manager in Jakarta. Tasha here is now a neuroscientist in Canada. Georgie here inherited his mother's huge ikan asin empire, believe it or not. And Ernest here is both a internet entrepreneur and a model. So they've all. I guess the reason I'm showing this is because it's kind of fascinating to realize just how fast these things happen. How for me this feels like a moment ago, and yet it was in fact close to 20 years previous to now.
Oh my goodness.
As well as being a teacher, I'm also a dad. This one on the right is mine. This is Kira. She's my youngest daughter, and this is my eldest daughter, Lintang, missing a tooth there, I think. Again, those photos were taken a while back, and this is what they look like more recently. Again, the reason I show this is because we might feel like we have an awful long time to sort of spend with our kids, to prepare them to sort of teach them about the world and teach them how to learn, and yet it really, really does go by in the blink of an eye, and before we know it, we're getting ready to send them off to university and send them out into the world. So I want to talk through some of the issues and some of the facts that I guess that are the underlying reason why we need a new model of education. Mental health is an issue. 20% of children under 14 right now are suffering from a mental health problem, and half of those problems develop, or half of all mental health problems develop while a child is under 14 years old. Of course, mental and substance abuse disorders are becoming more and more common, as are body image disorders. If you look at the kind of world our kids have to grow up in, they're looking at Instagram feeds and Snapchat, where everyone is photoshopped looking perfect, and our kids are growing up in this world where they're developing body image disorders because they're looking at images of perfection constantly, and it's a genuine problem for their mental health. There are also issues of balance. Our kids are being led towards a more sedentary life. It's becoming harder and harder even before COVID, it's becoming harder and harder to get outside and have some exercise. The last 4 months, that's become even more difficult, as I'm sure you've noticed. Sometimes the problem is it comes from us or societal or parental pressure as well. You know, you look at all these people; they all look very happy in their choices of occupation. There's a happy chef, there's a happy doctor, there's a happy builder, and sometimes as parents we say to our kids, "You can be whatever you want, so long as it's not one of these things." This is a real issue. You know, you looked at those people; they were happy in their careers, they were happy with their choices. But sometimes, whether we do it consciously or unconsciously, we might give the impression to our kids that there are some paths that are acceptable and some that are not, and that might add unnecessary pressure to them at certain stages. There are 8 trends. Globally, I think that we probably all need to be aware of. One of them is this, and the first time I saw this image, I was shocked. Can you see? Yeah, can you read the title on that, or is the yeah okay?
The title?
That is the text, I guess. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. There are more people living inside this circle than outside of it, which is amazing when you think about it. The more than half of the world's population lives inside this area, and of course we are in this area as well, of which includes of course China, India, and Indonesia, and it's really what it means is that we're living in an area of the world which is the most intensely populated and the most competitive, I guess, area of the world in the history of humanity. There's never been this kind of concentration of people, and there's never been this kind of concentration of talent in one region in human history. Has anyone seen this photo, or does anyone have any idea what might be happening in this photo?
They're building it. No?
It looks like that. It looks like they might be constructing.
Are they running away from something?
What if I told you this was a school?
Yeah, that was.
During the state examination. Yeah. So this is, I think this was, if I'm not mistaken, this was taken in a state in northern India. But I mean, it's indicative of a problem that's happening around the world. Of course, these people inside the school, the kids are taking their very, very high stakes, high pressure examination. It's like their entire 12, 15 years of education have been boiled down to a 2, 3, 4 hour examination. And these are friends and family members kind of, how should we say, offering some support during the examination. And
memory helpers.
a few reminders here and there. And this photo went viral when it happened. But it's you can't blame people for taking this step when so much pressure, so much of these children's future has been left to hang on an examination of just a few hours. It seems counterproductive, and it seems an illogical way to decide who gets to go to a good university and who gets to go to a not so good university. Likewise, when it comes to examinations, this is what we sometimes do when we set an exam. For a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. Of course, one guy here is looking pretty happy about this exam. The monkey on the left is looking pretty thrilled. The other animals are looking less enthused about the examination that they've set, because it's not a match to their skill set. It's not a match to their strengths. It's a one-size-fits-all approach to success, which disregards the talents of the other animals. And likewise, again, what many school systems do is they have a one-size-fits-all approach that focuses on examinations, and to the detriment of other abilities and skills that students might have. Okay. again, talking about the pressure we sometimes put on our kids, it is a stereotype, but there may be some an echo of truth to it. Is that the Asian grading scale is sometimes puts a lot of pressure onto students. A is average, B is below average, C can't eat dinner, D don't come home, and F find a new family. It's a bit of a joke, but I mean, perhaps some of us may have grown up in that kind of environment where that is the pressure that we were put under. There's often sometimes I would call it a misunderstanding that you can only have one or the other, that it's a zero-sum game, that somehow if a school spends time on well-being, then they have to take that time away from something else. So if a school spends time on the mental, social development of their students, then that means they're spending less time on the academics. But the truth of the matter is that that's not the case at all. In fact, the research suggests and proves that students who feel supported, who feel comfortable, who are mentally and socially well, are much more likely to succeed in their studies. So these are two things that rise at the same time, that help each other to raise, rather than being in competition with each other. Of course, we're all aware of the advent of robotics and AI. Many years ago, all of those machines would have been humans putting together those cars. And many, many years ago, for most of the 20th century, schools were preparing people for factory jobs, because that's where all the jobs were. For most of the 20th century, most of the jobs were in factories, which was why schools looked like factories. All the tables were facing forward. The teacher was at the front. There was a very specific time spent for A, a very specific time spent for B, for C, for D. 1 hour of maths, 1 hour of English, 1 hour of science, 1 hour, etc. And the teacher blew the whistle, then you went to the bathroom, etc., etc. It was a very factory-driven model of education, because it was preparing students for life, essentially life in a factory. As we all know, those jobs are gone now. And anyway, I imagine that very few of us here are aspiring for our kids to grow up and work in a factory. We're predicting that our kids will grow up to be knowledge workers, perhaps in a field that requires creativity, almost certainly in a field that focuses on skills and areas that cannot be replicated by robots or artificial intelligence, and that's an area that's shrinking. So it's an area that we as a school can focus on and be aware of. So there you see the factory model classroom. And previous models of education were very teacher directed. The teacher stood at the front of the class and was the only source of information, feeding downwards to the students. The students were sort of passive receivers of the information, and at the end of the week, or at the end of the month, or at the end of the year, there was a test to make sure that they got all that information. That was the appropriate model for education at that time. Our model nowadays is much more learner directed. The learner is at the center of the model. They are receiving information and giving information to the other, to their classmates, to the teacher, to adults in the community, to other adults in the school, to adults outside of the school, and to other children outside of the school. It's not that kind of top-down teacher-directed approach anymore. It's much more of a matrix of information, and our students are of course becoming more and more information literate, able to find that information from sources around the world before we've even had a chance to try and explain it to them. So I'm going to try a little interactive bit here, actually, okay? And we'll see if this works or not. I'm going to use something called a breakout room, and I'm going to send you into breakout rooms of 3 people. So there'll be 3 people in each of these breakout rooms, okay? And I'm going to send you there just for a couple of minutes. And what I want you to discuss is, I want you to discuss the question of what are the skills that people need in the workplace nowadays? So I can see some of you, I know some of you here are employers. I know that you have your own organizations, which is very important, and that will help with this, and you probably have employees yourselves. So the question I'd like you to discuss with your group, and again just for a couple of minutes, is what are the skills that you look for in employees joining your organization or employees coming to work with you? What are the skills that you're looking for? Is the question pretty clear?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. We're going to try this. It's a breakout room. I'm going to randomly assign you. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 12, 13, 14 people. So if I assign you to 4 rooms, that should be fine. We're going to do it automatically. And I'm going to put you in there just for 3 minutes, and then you will automatically be asked to come back to this room. Okay, so let's give it a go.
Yeah, that's why that was fast. That was fast.
It was until the last second.
That's all right. So maybe we can ask from. Oh, someone's mic is making noises. Maybe we can ask from group 1, which was Arif, Gracia, and Stephanie. What were some of the skills that your group came out with?
Yeah, I got cut off before we finished the discussion, but we did some discussion, and for me is the most important skill that I require for my employees is decision making and integrity. I think it's very important, especially for the manager level and up. I think they need to be able to make a decision without me just like monitoring them 24 hour.
Absolutely.
No, basically what we were discussing is skill is it based on education or is it based on the personality? Education is based on what we learn. Skill is something that we are good at because of practice, because we love to do it. So basically, I mean, anybody wants, if we are looking for a, let's say, staff or an employee or anyone, the main thing we have to look for is the person trustworthy or not. Because with trustworthiness, everything is included, hard work, on time, everything is there. It comes to that.
Yeah.
But education doesn't teach us that, unfortunately. So it is different kind of set skills that we have to learn in order to be trustworthy.
I think what we talked more, it was about values that people need to start treasuring, like respect and having integrity. And from my perspective, it's good that those practical values are starting from home. That way everybody can apply and follow from the education they have at home through outside, no matter where they are, if they are at school as a student or even as a teacher or working in a company. Also be active, to not expect people to just tell you what to do, but to see there's things to be done and just be proactive and cooperate with everybody that involves you together as a union. And I don't know if this was the entire idea, but just my members will tell me if I'm missing something. And in my own perspective is like, and I think this would be proactive also would add, be flexible to be able to face changes and challenges with not always a smile on the face, but with a positive mindset. And yeah, I think that was it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if
we also discuss about integrity. One more thing is we also discuss about integrity.
I said integrity. I mentioned integrity. Now, yeah, integrity, being respectful, being acceptant, those things.
Yeah. Well, I think if the last 4 months has taught us anything, it's the importance of sort of flexibility, adaptability, as you mentioned towards the end there, and the ability to adjust and survive and thrive in a rapidly changing situation. Breakout room 4, Budina, Emmanuel, and Mr. Ezra.
Well, it's the same thread that you guys all really just mentioned. You know, we talked about the importance of the attributes, the cognitive skills. As an employer, we can teach someone new the knowledge that you need for the job, but it's really difficult to teach someone on-the-job training about the problem-solving skills, the perseverance, those critical thinking skills that are really so important in today's world.
Absolutely. So what every group has said here is very ties in very well with the next slide here, which is just click that to present. So every year the World Economic Forum in Davos runs a survey of business leaders, of thought leaders, of governmental leaders, and asks them, you know, what do they see as the top 10 skills that they want in the workforce, in people coming in entrepreneurs, in new employees, new graduates coming into their businesses or into their organizations. And I mean, there's some consistency from year to year, and there's also some things that sort of go up and down the scale as the world changes. But I find it very telling that number 1 in 2015 and number 1 in 2020 remains the same, which is complex problem solving, which ties in really well with what some of you were saying about decision-making, initiative, being able to not just have knowledge, but being able to apply that knowledge to a novel problem, to a novel situation, is hugely important. We see moving up the rankings, we see things like critical thinking, we see things like creativity. I think you also mentioned people management, you also mentioned coordinating with others, emotional intelligence. I'd say one feature of emotional intelligence is, of course, integrity, which came up in so many of your discussions, judgment and decision making, service orientation, negotiation, and of course, just at the end, you mentioned that cognitive flexibility as well, which I'm guessing in 2021, cognitive flexibility might be shooting up the charts as we all struggle with the changing, the more rapidly changing world that we faced this last few months. So thank you for that. So what is a modern education at NJIS? Well, what is a modern IB education? There's 3 core tenets of the IB, which is that it's inquiry driven. What does that mean? It means that rather than starting with the answers being given by the teacher at the front of the class, it starts with questions. Sometimes those questions will come from the teacher, sometimes those questions will come from the students, but the course and the unit it's an investigation into a real world, real life problem. It's driven by inquiry, trying to find out the solution to a great mystery. It's also driven by international mindedness. Of course, as we know, our kids are not going to be, when they grow up, they're not going to be competing within just Jakarta or just within Indonesia or even just within Asia. They're going to be interacting and working and collaborating internationally, and that international mindedness needs to be baked into everything we do as a school. And finally, this concept of interdisciplinary learning. So, you know, if you go to the office, I imagine you don't spend 1 hour on English, 1 hour on mathematics, 1 hour on science, 1 hour on social science, take a 1 hour break, and then another hour on physical education, right? Your daily schedule, your life and my life doesn't look like that. You are daily, you're integrating all of your skills. You're integrating all of your areas of knowledge. You know, when you write a letter, when you write an email, I don't know if anyone writes letters anymore. When you write an email, you're integrating your language skills, but you're also perhaps, you know, there's reference to your math skills, to your scientific knowledge, to your social science knowledge, to your knowledge of psychology. All of those skills are integrated into every project you take on, into every task you face. So likewise, schools need to move away a little bit from that model of separating the subjects. Instead, they need to move more towards an interdisciplinary approach. A discipline is just another word for a subject. So it's an inter-subject learning. Your project or your unit in the PYP, it integrates your math skills, your science skills, your language skills, your Bahasa Indonesia skills, your English skills. All of these skills are integrated towards solving a real world problem. And that's one of the core tenets, I guess, of the IB. So I have said enough. In fact, I've gone way over time. The second part of this presentation is from Mr. Ezra, and I think I should stop sharing so that he can start sharing. Is that right?
Sure, that sounds
all right.
Perfect. Thank you. My name's Ezra. As most of you know, I'm a 4th grade teacher at NJIS, but just a little bit about me. I've been teaching probably about the same amount of time as Gerald. I started teaching in my hometown in Vancouver, Canada, but I've been internationally now for a number of years, going on about 15, 16 years, starting out in Mexico, northern Mexico in Monterrey, and then heading over to Asia, where I spent 7 years teaching in Singapore at the American school there, where I also met my wife, who's from Kalimantan, and she was working at the time in Singapore, and we moved to Jakarta about 6 years ago, and this is my first year at NJIS. So I'm going to give you guys a brief overview or rundown of what it looks like the IB program looks like in the lower school. It's called the primary years program. And Gerald touched upon the inquiry-driven, the international mindedness, that interdisciplinary learning. So in the PYP, we bring all those skills together. We're teaching students basically how to think for themselves and take responsibility for their own learning, and it's centered around, or it's focused on 6 transdisciplinary themes. So I think I have a fairly unique perspective. I'm wearing 2 hats. I have my teacher hat, and I have the parent hat. Both my kids, Adam and Aaliyah, go to NJIS. Adam's in 2nd grade, and Aaliyah's in kindergarten. And, I think kids start this inquiry-based learning from a very early age. It's not just school-driven, whether they're building towers in their room instead of bedtime, or, whether we're exploring the effects of what would this world be like without gravity. Every day inquiry is based in play, and I think especially being at an international school, we just have this diverse mix of cultures that we can celebrate and learn from. So I talked about the transdisciplinary themes, or mentioned the themes, and IB has 6 themes that we look at, and they've been selected for their relevance across the real world. So they focus on issues that go across subject areas. The main subject areas being the maths, the arts, science, PE, language, and social studies. And each theme as we go through them will last approximately 6 weeks. So just to give you an idea what they look like, I randomly selected a grade level, 4th, maybe not so random. Each teacher will put together a unit of inquiry. What are we going to be learning this year? And organized underneath those 6 themes, there'll be a central idea, an revolving around that central idea, and emphasize to as well what subject can we integrate. We talked about transdisciplinary learning. So I want to take one of these units of inquiry and look a little deeper into it. How the world works. So that big idea that I was talking about, for this unit, energy exists in various forms and can be changed, stored, and used in different ways. And the focus on this unit would be taking science and language arts and integrating PE into our inquiry-based learning. So for the language arts, we could be teaching students to how to write a persuasive essay on why we should look at renewable energy as a new source of energy. For PE, we can talk about healthy eating and how the energy that we gain from food to make our bodies move, how that parallels to the gasoline that we buy every day for our cars. Science, we obviously look at the different forms of energy, pose questions like, well, what if there was no electricity? What would our life be like? Currently, my own students, we're in the middle of an energy unit. But we're encouraging students to come up with their own lines of thoughts. What do they want to explore? So when Gerald was talking about how classes before used to be very much teacher directed and a one-way conversation, now it's very much a sharing, a back and forth. Students may come up with ideas or areas that they want to investigate, and that's what we're encouraging. Okay, we can give the framework, and then we all come up with our questions together. So built within those lines of inquiries, we have the learner profile attributes, and during our breakout session, a lot of the talk when we got back together was these attributes or these skills that we really want our employees to have. But these are all skills that we can be teaching from a very young age, and we actually purposefully put them into our themes, our thematic units. So they're implicitly taught. And we're focusing on 10 learner profiles. Right now in school we have NJIS Acts Right, and which were very similar to these. So we'll stick with that theme, but now this will be our focus. So whether they're built into the units or even just the day-to-day, it's part of the school curriculum, but it's also through the social interactions the students have at recess time, at lunch, through their sports groups, their after-school activities. It's during field trips, it's events at school, our assemblies, our drama productions, those kind of things. And it's at home with the wider community. All of these are constantly being reinforced. And so when I talk about implicit teaching, we'll choose 2 or 3 of these to specifically address every unit. As well, we're looking at approaches to learning, 5 categories of interrelated skills and their sub-skills. So, as teachers, we'll collaboratively plan these opportunities to develop these approaches to learning. If we think back to the science unit I was just talking about, the critical thinking skills. Wow, what are the advantages and disadvantages of renewable energy? Research skills, or how am I going to make an argument? How am I going to write a persuasive essay? These are all built in to our units of inquiry. During a unit, at the end of every unit, we want opportunities to reflect and take action. It's an integral part of the primary years program, the learning process. And it's an integral part to achieving that international mindedness, that view of the world where we see ourselves as a global community, responsibility towards each other. So this action, it can be it's student initiated, but it could be individual, or it could be through the class. We want it to be authentic, meaningful, mindful. It can happen at any time. It's not a way that we need to wrap up the unit. It can be during the unit. It can be short term, long term, ongoing, a one-time thing. It's also supported by the learning community as well. I want to share with you a little video from another IB school about what a unit of inquiry looks like, taking everything we just talked about and putting it together.
A unit of inquiry is basically the unit that lasts 6 weeks within the year. Teacher teams design learning engagement highly contextual to the 21st century learning that pretty much fall under the central idea.
A unit of inquiry is inquiring into different problems we have in our world and trying to take action about them.
We need to make sure that these unit of inquiries are giving those students the skills and understanding of what the world is like out there.
I think it's a very good idea that they're getting us ready early for the real world, because for our generation, the world might not be as clean or healthy as it is.
A PYP classroom is often very active, very dynamic, very vibrant, and the teacher is just a very wise facilitator who guides the learning engagement.
I try my best to have a blended approach to learning. You gotta remember that there's different learners in every classroom.
He uses a lot of fun tools, but at the same time, he teaches us what we should do, and he leaves it very open-ended, so we have to think about it. He doesn't direct us. First, we normally get a provocation to get us thinking about the unit, and after that, we move into inquiring, and finally, we sort out our ideas and take some action.
The unit of inquiry that I was most interested in so far, that I think would take effect in my life a lot, is the energy unit.
We're lucky enough to have one unit of inquiry per year where we go to the steam room. And our unit that we looked at this year was based on energy. And it was just amazing to see the questions that come from planning what they want to look into, to watching them do the research, and then ultimately watching them create something that's connected to that topic.
I want to find out like a sustainable source of energy that can power big vehicles like spaceships and big submarines.
So what the students have become in that unit is little scientists to investigate real life problems.
I've always been interested in learning about mental health and how the media affects how people view themselves, and this has given me an opportunity to do that.
In this unit, I really like researching into different problems, and I think sustaining the world's energy sources can help us a lot.
Of course, it's also action oriented. We always hope that the knowledge doesn't just stay on paper, but it actually extends outwards into meaningful action.
Ultimately that action is what you're looking for. When that action is there, you need to empower it, you need to celebrate it, and you'll watch it continue. The best part of my day is watching a student realize where they were and now where they are at the end of the unit and how much growth has happened. That's the best part of teaching for me.
All right, I think we have a little bit of time for some questions and answers.
If I may say something, sorry, I need to leave the discussion soon because the kids are going to tennis. So I just want to say, it's not a question, but I just want to say thank you so much for this meeting. And also I'm happy to see that our children are going to learn and be influenced by a more, I don't know the word in English, but a better learning system that it does not focus only on desk work and paperwork and one single kind of evaluation. I'm very happy to see that using the different skills that each one of the children have, it's the beginning of this new, sorry, was anybody hearing me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, because it just said my microphone was unmuted. But yes, I'm very happy. I'm looking forward for these new challenges for the next new year, school year. Yeah, and thank you, Mr. G and Ezra, for the presentations.
Thanks, Joanna. I mean, I'm really excited to be start off teaching fire-driven classroom, but also, as you said, I'm excited for my own two kids to be going through this program as well.
I think the kids are going to be able to benefit so much from a different approach of looking into what they can actually do and what they are actually capable of, and using their maximum potential towards their benefits and their future benefit, and that makes me very hopeful in their future. And then, so bye, and I'm leaving. I'm sorry. Bye bye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
See you. Thank you, Joanna.
Thank you.
Actually, sorry, but I was wondering if from NJIS would be able to give a specific course checking up on her work. So is there like maybe a certain course or specific course that can teach them how do you organize your homework? I mean, organizing skill is an important skill as well, right? For to be able to survive.
No, that's a really good question. I mean, self-management, self-organization skills are always important. They're always key to students' success in life. The ability to, do things like defer gratification, to do the hard thing first, to create a schedule, to create an agenda, to prioritize your tasks. All of these are hugely important skills. I think what I'll do just briefly is pull back to one of the slides that Mr. Ezra shared, because there was a lot in there, so I understand. So the approaches to learning, these are basically 5 approaches that go through all of the units, all the way from primary years up to grade 11, grade 12 in the high school. You've got, of course, social skills, you've got research skills, thinking skills, and communication skills, but you've also got, and this is 1/5 of the whole program, is self-management skills, which is 90% organizational skills, basically. So yeah, it's built into the system, it's built into the program, and these will be built into the units as and when the kids progress. Because you're right, having lots of knowledge, having wonderful skills, incredible high standard of education is basically pointless if you can't organize yourself to get it down on paper and get things done, I think. So yeah, it is a core part of the IB program, and it will be built into the units as the year progresses.
If I may say though, I do give credits to the students, how they're able to adapt.
Amazing.
Like really quickly. I mean, we didn't even teach them the Google Classroom. It's amazing. I mean, how they can just figure things out. Like seriously, I think this is one of the survival skills. I always tell my kids, I don't need you to get 100. I just need you to survive. You cannot choose who your boss is. Okay? You just need to survive whatever is in front of you, just survive. And like, she's able to figure out, I mean, she's still like, not perfectly, but still, at her age, being able to go, oh, I need to go for seesaw for this one. And no, mama, you cannot use this one. You just do this, you can use this shortcut. I was like, okay, all right. That's pretty good. I mean, and I think the generation that we're building in is quite different than the generation of the millennials, as we call it, where the as we know, millennials, we're talking about attributes of what we look for an employee. And I think one of the things that we find it very hard to find right now is people who are loyal to the company, because millennials, by the time they're 30 years old, they have 10 jobs experience already. So yeah, I'm just very, the perseverance that they have and the consistency of just trying to figure things out on how am I supposed to do this? I think it's really great. And if we can have this blended approach of still using a Google Classroom, still using Seesaw to maybe even like submit homework, because it's easier also for us as a parents to look at what is it that needs to be done. What is it? Oh, are they doing well? At the end of the days. So I think that's yes, that blended skills. That blended approach is, I think it's highly advantageous skill right now that we need them to survive this Corona thing.
And beyond. Agreed. Hello. Hi. Is that Elaine, is it?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I want to ask about this IB program.
Yes.
Because actually I just moved to NJIS right in the middle of grade 1, and so far that I've been in NJIS, actually my kids never got like textbooks to bring at home. Like textbooks like for any subjects. Like for the next IB they're going to be implemented, will there be like textbooks to guide them like to study at home? You know what I mean, right?
Sure. Yeah. And we've also been talking about this over the last few days. So the IB model is you can utilize textbooks, but they're only considered a supporting resource. So the IB model requires, you saw sort of the units of inquiry, the approaches to learning, the learner profile. The IB the year of the IB, each year is broken up into 6 units of inquiry. And of course, an inquiry-based education means that students are, they're asking their own questions, they're investigating, they're exploring, they're utilizing all those skills in an integrated way. So it doesn't lend itself to being driven by textbooks. Now, that doesn't mean that we won't provide materials. There will be written materials for support, as in, and those might take the form of practice pages from textbooks, but they'll be more targeted towards the skills that we're focusing on in the class at the moment. So the old model of working through a textbook, okay, it's the beginning of the year, I'm going to start on page 1. It's the middle of the year, I need to be at the middle of the textbook. It's the end of the year.
Yeah.
That's no longer sort of applicable to an IB or
IB curriculum,
to an IB model. That's not to say that the students will not develop those skills. Absolutely not. They will develop the same skills that they would be targeting in a textbook, but it's done in more real life scenarios. It's done through their inquiry. It's done through their investigations into the units of inquiry, instead of just, okay, turn to page 72 and do exercise 1, 2, 3. It's a lot more integrated and a lot more effective, I think, in terms of the engagement of the students.
Okay.
And Elaine, I'll just add to that. Even though we're in an inquiry-based approach and we have these interdisciplinary or these inquiry-driven units, there's still going to be standalone lessons or standalone subjects that have to be taught in class, whether that's getting prepared for some of the units, or things that we think are really essential skills that we just want to talk about at that time. So it's going to be a mixture or combination of both thematic units and standalone subject.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, if you're teaching long division might not fit into a unit on animals or water. So they're standalone units. The kids are still covering the full set of the year's standards. Those that can be covered through the unit are covered through the unit. Those that are standalone are standalone.
Okay, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, one more question. I'm reading this article that says that IB might be more a realistic preparation for liberal arts college. Does that mean that there's Michaela was enrolled in BPK Penabur, which is well known for its math and science. Is there certain are you guys gonna work on the math and science part of it as well? So that, because we don't really know where our kids going to be, we don't really know what talent they have.
Right. Right now we have we've been following the Common Core curriculum in both language arts and mathematics. And when I looked into the scope and sequence of the IB math and compared it with the Common Core, both are very inquiry driven, and there was a lot of parallels between both. I really focused on the 4th grade when I was looking because I was most familiar, but I didn't see a big shift or transition away from what we're our current curriculum. I'd say the biggest shift is the international mindedness when we start to look at things like social studies, and which are really embedded within these units of inquiry.
I would add on to that as well. Feel free to join the next session starting at 10:30, because we do sort of break down where IB graduates go. But I mean, I'm just looking at some of the stats right now. For example, graduates of DP, like IB DP schools in China, 71.6% of them end up in top 500 universities. Only 2.1% of them end up in liberal arts colleges. So there's a strong basis where these students end up in top universities, not specifically liberal arts colleges, and the acceptance rate of IB students is tending towards being higher than those of other university entry examinations. There's a nice breakdown in the presentation later, so like I say, please feel free to join in on that, or we could share the video of the presentation later on as well. So I just want to say a huge thank you for taking your time out on a Friday and for joining us today. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.